Okay, this one is called Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts number 25, Article 3 Courts. We're going to go through which courts are Article 3 and which ones are not, and why. I've got a new subscription channel available on HowTube, and so I encourage everybody to check out HowTube. So first of all, I'm not a liar. Well, I'm a lawyer. No, I'm a liar. You should never take my word for anything. You should always do your own research. I provided references to aid you in your research. I don't know everything, and I'm open to any ideas. There's 4 types of people you'll meet in your life. There's the people who try to wake up the slaves. There's the slave masters. There's the people who have no idea they're slaves. And there's the people who like being slaves. Which one are you? Do you really know for sure? Are you who you think you are? If you can see through the illusion, then you are the solution. And this is the matrix. Things are not what they appear. If the people do not know their basic rights and freedoms, how can they know when or if their rights and freedoms are being infringed? How on earth can they possibly know? Never forget the men who started this country were marijuana-growing, whiskey-drinking, tax-evading rebels who left their beds at night to shoot at the cops. And that's true. It's exactly who they were. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex. I don't trust the military-industrial complex. I don't trust the mainstream media. I don't trust the bankster criminal cabal that owns the government, owns the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex, owns the military-industrial complex, and owns the mainstream media. And if you call me a conspiracy theorist, I don't trust you. Government is not reason, it's not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. So what we're going to talk about today is Article 3 courts, what it is and what it is not. And I think you'll agree that there are no Article 3 courts except the Supreme Court under certain circumstances. And otherwise, it's not even an Article 3 court. This is Rundle and Delaware and Rundle versus Delaware and Raritan Canal Company, U.S. Supreme Court, 1852. My opinion is, and has long been, that the mayor and aldermen of a city corporation, or the president and directors of a bank, or the president and directors of a railroad company, and of other similar corporations are the true parties that sue and are sued as trustees and representatives of the constantly changing stockholders. A corporation, therefore, being not a natural person, but a mere creature of the mind, invisible and intangible, cannot be a citizen of a state or of the United States, and cannot fall within the terms or the power of the above-mentioned article, and can therefore neither plead nor be impleaded in the courts of the United States. So, no corporation, and they're all corporations. This is Title 15, United States Code, Section 44. A corporation shall be deemed to include any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust or association, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members, and has shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest. And then it goes through the same definition without shares of capital stock or certificates of interest. And any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust or association, incorporated or unincorporated, without shares of capital, stock, or certificates of interest, except partnerships. Okay, so a partnership is not included in this as a corporation, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members. That's why a partnership files a Form 1065 tax return, which is a reporting return only for the partners. Partnership never pays taxes. It's a pass-through entity. Commerce means commerce among the several states or with foreign nations or in any territory of the United States or in the District of Columbia or between any such territory and another or between any such territory and any state or foreign nation or between the District of Columbia and any state or territory or foreign nation. So that's what they do, is they bring the District of Columbia outside of 10 miles square, and when you get stopped by the cops, that's the District of Columbia, and you're in the state, so you're in commerce. Especially when they assault you with their Roman cult Sestake Trust. And that's the key. They have to fabricate evidence of that Roman cult Sestake Trust. The United States District Court is not a true United States court established under Constitution Article 3 to administer the judicial power of the United States, but was created by virtue of the sovereign congressional faculty granted under Article 4, Section 3 of making all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory belonging to the United States. So all federal courts are territorial, and I would submit that they're more than territorial. They're actually in the District of Columbia because they all use zip codes. But this is Balzac versus People of Puerto Rico, U.S. Supreme Court. This is the Code of Law for the District of Columbia, Section 3, located at 31 Stat 1190. And said Supreme Court shall divide said district into 10 subdistricts and prescribe the place in each subdistrict where the justice thereof shall have his office for the transaction of business, and may change the boundaries of such subdistricts and the locations of the offices of the justices therein from time to time, as the volume and convenience of the business may require. So, this is the Code of Law for the District of Columbia. So, there is a Supreme Court of the District of Columbia. So, when you file a petition for writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, you're in the District of Columbia. And you're really filing a petition to the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia. But if you file a petition for writ of error, which is the way they did it prior to about 1900, it was like early in the 1900s when they came out with the certiorari. Before that, it was a writ of error. And so you could file it previously from one of the states as a writ of error. But you can still do it, and we're going to talk about that more. Anyways, all corporations are in a zip code. All government offices are in a zip code. The United States Postal Service is a corporation domiciled in the District of Columbia, and that's where the zip codes come from. And this is Downs versus Bidwell. I'm surprised that that site isn't there, but anyways, it is Downs versus Bidwell. Eliminating then from the opinions of this court all expressions unnecessary for the disposition of the particular case, and gleaning therefrom the exact point decided in each of the following. In each, the following propositions may be considered as established. Number 1, that the District of Columbia and the territories are not states within the judicial clause of the Constitution, giving jurisdiction in cases between citizens of different states. That territories are not states within the meaning of revised statute section 709, permitting writs of error from this court in cases where the validity of a state statute is drawn into question. So that's why they went to because the federal courts are all territorial, and so therefore you can't do a writ of error from the federal court. You can do a writ of error from the state court, I think. I haven't seen, there's one that we're going to talk about that I think was a writ of error, but from a state court. That the District of Columbia and the territories are states as that word is used in treaties with foreign powers. Respect to the ownership, disposition, and inheritance of property. Gee, that sounds like the Sestake Trust. That the territories are not within the clause of the Constitution providing for the creation of a Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress may see fit to establish. So again, Article 3. Territories are not in Article 3. And this is National Mutual Insurance Company of the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, 1948. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states are not included in the catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power nationally, covers those citizens even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. So, plenary power, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Should a suit be brought against any party or corporation in any district in which he or it does not reside or hold business, and a plea to the jurisdiction on this account may be filed by said defendant, the party or corporation interposing such plea shall disclose under oath the district in which he or it should have been sued. And that's Section 5 of the Code of Law for the District of Columbia, 31 Stat 1198 to 1191. So the important thing to understand is that that's why they use the zip codes. They put zip codes on everything. They're all these corporations tell you what zip code they're in, because that's all in the District of Columbia. And they're telling you that. To regulate commerce, and so the Code of Law for the District of Columbia, Chapter 18 and 31 Stat 1280 is entitled Corporations. Okay, so that's a whole chapter in the Code of Law for the District of Columbia. It's full of all sorts of stuff about corporations. And it's authorized under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. To regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So the federal government, which is the District of Columbia, regulates commerce, which means corporations. So if you're a corporation, you're in the District of Columbia. When you incorporate into the government. Everything subject to regulation is government property. A corporation is a franchise from the government. So the question is are you a corporation? Status, state, condition, compare a state. A corporation has no status as a citizen outside the jurisdiction where it was created. Okay, a corporation, again, that's all District of Columbia. That's Roman law. A corporation is a citizen's a corporation. If they're assaulting you with their U.S. citizen slave, then you're in the District of Columbia. This is Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Law of status, category law dealing with personal non-proprietary rights, whether in rem or in personam. It is one of 3 departments into which civil law is divided, okay? So civil law, Roman civil law are all convertible phrases and mean the same thing. And so this is law of status is under Roman law. At common law, status means nothing. This is 102 Stat 1344, Public Law 100-418, August 23rd, 1988. I'm not sure which act this is. Anyways, definitions as used in a section. The term United States business means a United States citizen. And also it can mean a corporation, partnership, or any other association created under the laws of the United States or of any state. And so, again, if you're a U.S. citizen, you're a corporation. And that goes back to that definition of corporation at 15 U.S.C. Section 44. That definition includes any Sestake trust, any kind of trust. They're bringing the District of Columbia outside 10 Mile Square in violation of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. If you're a man, okay, that's the argument. To exercise, that's why the challenge to standing is so powerful. And we're going to be talking about that in another video soon. This is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as made by session of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the state same shall be for the erection of ports, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. And so that's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Interesting point is that there are no federal enclaves in Texas. There's post offices, there's federal courts, there's even Fort Hood, a federal military base. But none of that has been granted by the state of Texas. Has been ceded by the state of Texas. So they're not federal enclaves. Plenary jurisdiction. We're talking about plenary in that case. National Mutual Insurance Company versus Tidewater Transfer Company. Plenary jurisdiction, the court's full and absolute power over the subject matter and the parties in a case. Okay, so it's a dictatorship. Plenary is total power. Plenary, full, complete, entire, Black's Law Dictionary, 9th edition. Plenary, full, complete, in the courts of admiralty and the English ecclesiastical courts, causes or suits in respect of different courses of proceedings, and each are termed plenary or summary. That's Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 3rd revision, 8th edition, volume 2. That's like in 1901. Plenary. A plenary power or plenary authority is a complete, absolute power to take action on a particular issue with no limitations. It's derived from the Latin term plenus. Now, that's taken from Wikipedia, but that's consistent with this following definition that's taken from Legal Information Institute, which is Cornell Law School, Cornell University. Plenary power. Complete power over a particular area with no limitations. This term is often used to describe the commerce power of Congress under the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. Congress is granted full power over interstate commerce. The court has found that states are not able to pass laws affecting interstate commerce without the permission of Congress. It's a dictatorship, folks. Lieber Code, Instructions for the Government of the Armies of the United States in the Field, prepared by Francis Lieber, promulgated as General Orders Number 100 by President Lincoln, 24th of April, 1863. Article 1. A place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying army, whether any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. So everybody knows there's actually a couple ways you can get martial law, but everybody knows that the Union Army invaded Galveston, Texas in 1862. And so Texas has been under military occupation ever since. Article 2 of the Lieber Code. Martial law does not cease during hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the Commander-in-Chief or by special mention in a treaty of peace concluding the war. So, again, that's why the police wear military uniforms, military rank structures. Texas is under a military occupation, martial law, military occupation. That's why it's under martial law. Has been since the Civil War. Plenary martial law is District of Columbia. That's why all those cops have to be U.S. citizens. All those government officials all have to be U.S. citizens. Martial law in a hostile country consists of the suspension by the occupying military authority of the criminal and civil law and of the domestic administration and government of the occupied place or territory, and in the substitution of military rule and force for the same, as well as in the dictation of general laws. Dictation, that's dictatorship. As far as military necessity requires the suspension, substitution, or dictation. Dictatorship. Now, they don't want you figuring that out because that's what caused the War of Independence. And the federal Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And that's where our remedy is. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which will be made in pursuance thereof, the Libra Code is not made in pursuance of the laws of the Constitution. And all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the constitutional laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. That's Article 6, Clause 2. So that trumps the Libra Code. But you got to bring up the issue. If you don't bring up the issue, then you're in a dictatorship. Section 15. As used in this act, the term United States means the government of the United States. So let's read this how it's really saying, okay? The term currency of the government of the United States means currency which is legal tender in the government of the United States and includes United States notes, treasury notes of 1890, gold certificates, silver certificates, Federal Reserve notes, and circulating notes of Federal Reserve banks and national banking associations. So, and that's the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, 48 Stat 344. And under the Uniform Commercial Code, the United States is located in the District of Columbia. And this is where it's codified, 12 U.S.C. 411. Federal Reserve notes to be issued at the discretion of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System for the purpose of making advances to Federal Reserve banks through the Federal Reserve agents as hereinafter set forth, and no other purpose are authorized. So, and Federal Reserve notes are securities too. And I got to research that. But they're definitely securities. The forced loans of 1862 and 1863 in the form of legal tender notes, Federal Reserve notes are legal tender, were vital forces in the struggle for national supremacy. They formed a part of the public debt of the United States. National supremacy, which means the District of Columbia is supreme. Juilliard versus Greenman. Federal Reserve notes are commercial paper. Federal Reserve notes are a forced loan. Federal Reserve notes are IOUs. Federal Reserve notes are securities. All commercial paper falls into two categories. It's a promissory note or an IOU. A requirement for a promissory note is a promise to pay. Used to say gold certificates and silver certificates were promissory notes because there was a promise on there that said go get the silver or gold at the Treasury. It's impossible to pay a debt with a Federal Reserve note. Article 37 of the Libra Code. This rule does not interfere with the right of the victorious invader to tax the people or their property, to levy forced loans, to billet soldiers, to appropriate property, especially houses, lands, boats, or ships, and churches, for the temporary and military uses. So this is where the forced loans come from. And another interesting point is Libra Code is international law. War, the law of war, is international law. So this applies anywhere. The law of war is international law. This is Chisholm versus Georgia. It says 2 Dallas 419. It's actually 4 Dallas 419 at 461. In despotic governments, the government has usurped in similar manner both upon the state and the people. Hence all arbitrary doctrines and pretensions concerning the supreme, absolute, and uncontrollable power of government. In each, man is degraded from the prime rank which he ought to hold in human affairs. In the latter, the state as well as the man is degraded. Of both degradations, striking instances occur in history, in politics, and in common life. The government does not necessarily equal a state. They always attack you with a corporation, and it is easily defeated with a challenge to standing, because no corporation has standing to say anything to any man or woman. It's all corporate law, which is further evidence they're bringing the District of Columbia outside 10 Mile Square. When you sue them, always sue the CEO and board of directors, never sue their corporations. And see my exclusive video on how to. One of the things that I do is I build a case, and then I file felony criminal complaints against them for attempted murder. And the idea being is that for those of you who are familiar with the U.S. versus Schooner Amistad case, the Amistad was a slave ship, and the slaves revolted against their masters and killed them all except for one. And they said, take us back to Africa. They didn't know how to sail. And the guy that did know how to sail sailed in circles off the coast of Virginia until the U.S. Navy found him, and they brought him back to the U.S. and put him on trial for murder. And there was two arguments. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The two arguments were is if they were slaves, they're no different than a dog or a cat, which is property, which a slave is property, and a dog or a cat can't commit murder. And the argument is they're free men and they had every right to do what they did. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the court said they're free men and they had every right to do what they did, sent them back to Africa. So you have a right to resist an unlawful arrest with lethal force if necessary. These cops, they don't ever have a lawful warrant. And in Texas, a transportation code offense is a Class C misdemeanor, which is not a crime. So they don't have probable cause to stop you either. So you have a right to resist an unlawful arrest with lethal force if necessary. And so I file felony criminal complaints against them for attempted murder because they intend that I exercise my right to resist their unlawful arrest with lethal force so they can murder me. And I file criminal complaints against the mayor, the city council, every member of the city council, the judge, the prosecutor, the city attorney, and if the city law firm, if it's a law firm, then I go after all the partners in the law firm too. And so they don't want to talk to me now. I just don't understand why. Money means a medium of exchange. This is under international law. So this is how they do it under the Uniform Commercial Code, which is also known in Texas as the Texas Business and Commerce Code. Party, as distinguished from a third party, they like to go and make this confusing. Person engaged in a transaction, right? Commercial. My new book is available, Trump, a True American Patriot or Not. This is the back of the book, and I wrote the book. We hired a company to help us to get it published, and they actually wrote the back here. And so I'm going to read part of this because I think they nailed it. It says, for too long, a small group of our nation's capital has reaped the rewards. This is taken from Trump's inaugural address. For too long, a small group of our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government at the cost of its citizens. Washington flourished, but the insiders refused to share in its wealth. Politicians prospered, but allowed our jobs to leave and our factories to close. Not anymore. And Trump, a true American patriot or not, Glenn Fern and Mike Blackwell reveal the depths of corruption, deceit, and manipulation infesting our political system for hundreds of years, regardless of political affiliation. Read the hard evidence that exposes how our elected officials sold Americans into slavery. Understand the Founding Fathers' true intent when they formed our Republican form of government. Discover the influence of the satanic Roman cult on our politicians and political system. Does Donald Trump want to transfer power back to we the people? In Trump, you will see the great battle that is upon us. And I think they nailed it there. Thank you very much. You can order the book from Amazon.com or from my website. It's $40 plus shipping. I prefer you order the book my website. Amazon does not provide autographed books. If you want the book autographed, order the book from my website. But don't forget to let me know what you want the autograph to say. Do you want to know the origins of the deep state? Who's behind it? It's in the book. Do you want to know why it's called the Trump administration? Do you want to know what an administration is? It's in the book. Do you want to know how Trump came to be president? Do you want to know who owns Congress? Of course Congress is owned. Why do you think Pelosi gets up there and says, we can't read this bill until after we pass it? Because the owners are saying that. That's instructions from the owners. You want to know why they're called law enforcement officers? They're there to enforce the military occupation. Do you want to know how you have become a slave? Do you want to know what the root cause of the War of Independence was? It's in the book. Same thing is going on right now. Do you want to know why every president goes to visit the Pope on their first international trip? It's in the book. Mike Blackwell asked me to write the book. I don't know how many of you have known about Jerome Corsi. He's a guy that lives up in the Northeast. He's written a bunch of books. He's got a PhD in political science from Harvard. He's got a YouTube channel, a website. Anyways, he says that there's a YouTube video where he says that in 2015, 5 generals came to see him, and there was 5 generals in the Pentagon that were going to overthrow Obama. And he said, well, you can do that if you want, but you might want to go talk to Donald Trump first. And 3 months later, he gets a phone call. They decided not to overthrow Obama because Donald Trump had agreed to run for president. So, my opinion, this book is 95% provable facts, probably 99% provable facts. But there is some opinion. And my opinion is that the entire Trump administration was a giant military psyop. So, I don't know how many of you remember Howard Hughes, and why he was hiding out all the time. I've actually learned a bunch of stuff since I wrote the book, and a bunch of things have happened since I wrote the book. The book was actually published in August of 2019, so it's been a while since it was published. Anyways, Howard Hughes, the reason he was hiding out all the time. I think all of these billionaires get approached by the New World Order crowd and get told they're going to go wrong with the program, turn up dead. But I've actually found out since then that Howard Hughes got blackballed after the end of World War II. And, you know, everybody knows that he was a billionaire and he got lots of defense contracts during the war and stuff like that. But after the war was over, he got blackballed. They couldn't get any contracts. And so he went and got some young ladies to go and sleep with the military-industrial complex types to find out from Pillow Talk what was going on. And that's when he found out they were planning on doing what they're doing right now. They want to kill off about 90% of us and have a global plantation. And so he had actually published a set of manuals and volumes, several volumes, and Kennedy was implementing that stuff. Remember, 7 days before his assassination, Kennedy gave that speech about the secret combination speech, the secret combination speech. Anyways, so I guess that's why Howard Hughes was hiding out, because he was worried that they were going to get him next, because they killed Kennedy, they killed his brother, they killed a bunch of people right around then. So then I think the same thing happened with Trump. There was a helicopter crash in 1984, and I happen to know a little bit about helicopters, because that helicopter crashed because the blades came off. Well, you know, I started out in 1976 working on helicopters, and I can tell you that helicopters crash for a lot of reasons, but I've never ever heard of a helicopter crashing because the blades came off. They crash because maybe the tail rotor drive shaft bearing seizes, and the tail rotor drive shaft won't work, or you know, there's a bunch of reasons, but never because the blades came off. Never heard of that. Anyways, David Wilcock actually has a video, YouTube video, where he talks about Howard Hughes and the stuff about Howard Hughes. So, you know, you have to come to your own conclusions. But a lot of this stuff sure fits together good. In reality, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in a way. Thank you, Donald Trump. So a corporation's owned by the government. This is Article 4, Section 2. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belong to the United States. So if you're subject to the regulations, you are property. And that's the same thing in Canada, in Communist Canada. Canadian Ownership and Control Determination Act. Owned means subject to the regulations. And Section 3 of the Government Corporation Operation Act of Canada. Every corporation is full of all its purposes an agency of the bitch. Well, I guess it's the son of a bitch now. Anyways, martial law is the public law of necessity. Necessity calls for force. Necessity justifies its exercise. Necessity measures the extent and degree to which it may be employed. That necessity is no formal, artificial, legalistic concept, but an actual, factual one. It is the necessity of taking action to safeguard the state against insurrection, riot, disorder, or public calamity. What constitutes necessity is a question of fact for each case. That's Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. Tyrants say, "Oh, we got to do this because of necessity," and the slaves say, "Oh yeah, you got to do this. We got to be your slave because it's so important." The action of Congress and the passage of the first Legal Tender Act was placed distinctly upon the ground of the existing imperative need of government, and the Legal Tender Clause was urged as adopted as a war measure. Juilliard versus Greenman. No state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold or silver coin, a tender in the payment of debts. That's U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. There is no lawful money in general circulation since 1965. International law, there's no such thing as a sovereign under international law. Governments descend to the level of a mere private corporation and take on characteristics of a mere private citizen where private corporate commercial paper and securities is concerned. For purposes of suit, such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. Governments lose their immunity and descend to the level of private corporations when involved in commercial activity enforcing negotiable instruments, as in fines, penalties, assessments, bails, taxes. The remedy lies in the hands of the state and its municipalities seeking remedy. Congress, claiming its martial law power to declare war, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, imposed martial law in the United States and never discontinued it. The result was an extension of military and municipal jurisdiction of Congress. But where's the evidence of this? Look at the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the legal tender laws, the 14th Amendment, etc., etc., etc. The 14th Amendment is an extension of the national military powers presently used in municipal character and enforced by municipal laws stretched far beyond the original limitations and enforced in Article 1 tribunals, okay? So again, all of these courts that you see nowadays are Article 1 tribunals. There is no Article 3 court. The only Article 3 court is a common law jury of your peers or the Supreme Court under certain circumstances. Although I gotta say that in Texas, sometimes the county court at law, you'll see the judge come out in a business suit, and that's suggesting that he's a common law judge. Anyways, statutes have been passed extending courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the courts of common law, and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. And for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. That's dictatorship, folks. Causes and necessities for taking up arms by the Continental Congress in 1775. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. Well, gee, that sounds like what's going on right now. Money manipulators. And this is all taken from the Declaration of Independence. You know, the Declaration of Independence starts off with a preamble, and then it's basically a list of grievances. Why we're telling the king to get lost. So, anyways, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others, to encourage their migrations hither. Gee, that sounds like open borders. And raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. That sounds like encourage their migrations hither. That sounds like open borders and maybe even election interference. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. Gee, that sounds like kangaroo courts. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Gee, that sounds like military police everywhere, code enforcers everywhere. And there's always some Gestapo thug coming out around the corner. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. That sounds like martial law. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws. Martial law, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Color of law. Pretended legislation is something that looks like law but isn't. That's color of law. For protecting them by a mock trial, kangaroo courts, show trials, denials of due process, there's anywhere that you'll get your rights violated is in the so-called courts. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, bringing color of law outside not exceeding 10 miles square. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. That sounds like bringing the District of Columbia dictatorship outside not exceeding 10 miles square. That's exactly what it is. It's exactly the same thing that went on prior to the War of Independence. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. Gee, that sounds like a military dictatorship. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. Gee, that sounds like a military dictatorship. He's abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Gee, that sounds like martial law military dictatorship under the Trading with the Enemy Act. He destroyed the lives of our people. That's populating the jails with commercial transactions. Texas has a bigger percentage of people in jail than the worst communist dictatorship, more than China, more than the Soviet Union as a percentage of the people. Texas is a police state. It's a dictatorship. Give me liberty or give me death, by Patrick Henry after he witnessed a man flogged to death for refusing a license. The corrupt Star Chamber courts, where they force you, they assault you with their bar member scum. The corrupt Star Chamber courts required defendants to have counsel. Star Chamber stood for swiftness and arbitrary power as a limitation on the common law. That's U.S. Supreme Court, Ferretta versus California. Whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain, this is George III, Chapter 12, 1778, 2 years after the Declaration of Independence, 2 years. Whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain for the purpose of raising a revenue in His Majesty's colonies, provinces, and plantations in North America has been found by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no shit, Batman. That from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, or assessment whatever payable in any of the colonies, provinces, or plantations in North America or the West Indies, except only such duties that may be expedient to impose for the regulation of commerce. Gee, that sounds like they're closing the barn door after the horses get out. The United States shall guarantee every state in this union a republican form of government. Well, you know, that's Article 4, Section 4. And what's a republican form of government? You know, one thing I can say for sure is it's not a military dictatorship. But in considering the question before us, it must be borne in mind that there is no law of nations standing between the people of the United States and their government, and interfering with their relation to each other. The powers of the government and the rights of the citizen under it are positive, practical regulations plainly written down. The people of the United States have delegated to it certain enumerated powers and forbidden it to exercise others. The purpose of a republican form of government is to shield we the people from international law. Copies of these documents can be found on my website and linked under my recent videos. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information, shares a DVD with over 100 searchable law dictionaries and other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the fake money, the military script, the Federal Reserve notes, the cash app gifts, the checks, the money orders. Send me an email for particulars. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. Under the Articles of Confederation, Article 1, the style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. And there's only two places I've seen that. This is an image of a passport, and it's not the United States of America, is it? A passport defined. A passport is a written document given to a person or persons by a commander of belligerent forces, authorizing him or them to travel unmolested within the district occupied by his troops. Passports are issued by the State Department or similar office in other countries to diplomatic agents and others entering or traveling in foreign countries, which are the same general character as those issued during war. The latter should, when practicable, have a photograph of the bearer attached. And that's Rules of Land Warfare, 1914 edition, Passport Safe Conduct, Safeguards, and Cartels, Chapter 7, Section 4, Article 276, page 100. And this is a silver certificate. And it says the United States of America on there, although it's all block capital letters. That's the only place I've seen it, and also on land patents. That's the only place I've seen it, is silver, the fake money, and the land patents. At common law, only gold or silver, legal tender, which is an 1820 court case quoting Book 2 of the Institutes and the Laws of England by Coke in the 1500s. If you want common law, it requires honest measures. There is a distinction between a debt discharged and one paid. When discharged, the debt still exists, though divested of its character as a legal obligation during the operation of the discharge. Discharge falls under the Uniform Commercial Code, which is private international law. Check out my other videos: Banks or Thieves playlist, Roman Cult playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 8, Do it yourself, how not to volunteer for the selected service in the draft. Martial law is here. Do it yourself, no income tax. Do it yourself, free mail. Do it yourself, kangaroo courts. Canada Border Pigs playlist. Bar members and their satanic connections playlist. This rule does not interfere. This one we've already seen. Cryptocurrency is not a forced loan. Anything can be used as a means of exchange as long as we agree to it. It's called barter. My blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page is deleted. My private group at Facebook called Sovereignty International is being deleted. You know, quite frankly, I haven't been on Facebook in months, and I'm not interested in going there. My freelist.org private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants. My Google private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. My HowTube channel is called Sovereignty International, and Rumble is called Sovereignty International. Sad will be the day when the American people forget their traditions and their history and no longer remember that the country they love, the institutions they cherish, and the freedom they hope to preserve were born from the throes of an armed resistance to tyranny and nursed in the rugged arms of fearless men. Well said. Banks are international law. Military dictatorship is international law. Uniform Commercial Code is international law. All codes, rules, and regulations are international law. And law of nations and international law are convertible phrases. Forced loans is probably the single most important thing for a military dictatorship. It makes it so the courts presume that you do not pay a debt. It makes everybody into paupers. Paupers have no rights except what they allow you to have. Gold is the money of kings. Silver is the money of gentlemen. Barter is the money of peasants. Debt is the money of slaves. Federal Reserve was set up in under the insurance laws of the United States in the middle of the night. Federal Reserve notes are worthless insurance script. Anything purchased with worthless insurance script is the property of the issuer of the script. Taxes are the fee for using the private money system. The single most important requirement for a Republican form of government is lawful money. Lawful money is not Federal Reserve notes. Lawful money is not bank notes. Lawful money is not forced loans. It's not discharged debt, and it's not securities. Federal Reserve notes are securities, by the way. Resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Therefore, non-resistance to tyrants is obedience to Satan. Excuse me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video. On YouTube, don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. On Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. That's my YouTube channel. And the subscribe button's clicked or it'll be red. The bell, if it was clicked, it'd look like it's ringing. So it needs to be clicked. What is called proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety in circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military power. That is why they have to pass statutes for common law offenses. That's why all statutes are edicts under martial law. We can't even begin to count the number of times judges, lawyers, and statesmen have said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by statutes. They'd be more truthful if they said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by martial law. There's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. Under a military dictatorship, there's no law, which is why they're required to pass statutes which are edicts for common law crimes like murder and assault. This creates civil law, which creates a democracy. Under military dictatorship, you have a democracy, and a democracy is international law. And if you read the writings of the Founding Fathers, a democracy was a bad thing. I have exclusive content available on my website and on HowTube. It's $9.99 a month for videos, plus unlimited email consultations. But I'm not a liar. Well, I'm an attorney. No, I'm not a liar. But I can tell you what I would do under certain circumstances and where to find the forms. The only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception. My agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I cannot fight all the battles. Some of my exclusive content is an Arlington private information share, land deed training, estoppel certificates training, foreclosure estoppel certificates training, corporate denial training, toll roads notice and demand training, invoice training, notice of void judgment training, revocation signature training, third-party witness training, federal habeas corpus training, revocation of voter registration training, criminal complaint training. There's about 3 videos of that, and there's going to be more. Lawsuit training, there's 1 video of that, and there's going to be more. Other training requests, Northeast private information shares. There's going to be upcoming videos. Will be up there first with my exclusive videos. Challenge to standing, and there'll be some videos on how to fill out how to do a challenge to standing, some tips, things to consider, and same thing for a petition for writ of mandamus. So far I've done one in Texas and I've done one in New York. I'm currently helping someone in Nevada, so and each time I do that I will put up a video for those particular states, because every state's going to be different. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free, linked in my videos and on my website. And all exclusive content will be available on my website and on howtube.com. If you go to the, if you're not already subscribed to my website, then what will happen is if you click on the link on my website, it'll take you to HowTube. They've been telling people for decades that we're in a democracy. Do you think that's an accident? Anybody who calls it a democracy is engaged in treason. And we already saw this one. Taxes cause the War of Independence. If they can tax you, then you are their slave. You're forced to work for them for nothing. It has become more and more difficult to be free. Taxation is forced work for nothing. All subjects over which the sovereign power of the state extends are objects of taxation, but those over which it does not extend are exempt from taxation. This proposition may also be pronounced as self-evident. It's obvious. The sovereignty of the state extends to everything which exists by its authority or its permission. And that's McCullough versus Maryland, 1819. There's 2 ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword and the other is by debt. When acting to enforce the statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer, but not in a judicial capacity. Courts administering or enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially, but merely acts as an extension, as an agent for the involved agency, but only in a ministerial and not a discretionary capacity. They're bought and paid for clerk. It's the accepted rule, not only in the state courts or the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes, as a ministerial clerk for the agency. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature and otherwise, act as mere clerks for the involved agency. That's why the judge will sit there and the prosecutor will tell them what to do. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. Where there is no jurisdiction, there is no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been the law from the days of Marshal Saya. And that's a federal court case quoting Bradley versus Fisher, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case, which quotes 10 Coke 68, which is Coke in the 1500s. Judge wears a military uniform. Judge sits there and plays stupid. If you fail to follow some obscure rule or procedure, they sell you into slavery. Everything they do is a fraud and a nullity. It's a kangaroo court. Oh, and there's a kangaroo court. Judge works for the state. Prosecutor works for the state. Police or witness works for the state. Vast majority of the disputes that the police initiate on behalf of their employer are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the police, the only witness, also the police, all represent the same party. And 6, no corpus delicti, mens reus or acts reus can be produced. Doesn't qualify to be heard according to his own laws. The state, therefore, is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. Exactly. But in fact, and in law, such statutes are intended to be applied to those who are here as residents in the state under the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Federal Constitution and the so-called 14th Amendment. And that's United States versus United Mine Workers, 1947, and that's not a direct quote, that's a summary. The current so-called 13th Amendment, neither slavery nor involuntary slavery shall, except for punishment for crime, where the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. He, the prisoner, has as a consequence of his crime not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights except those which the law and its humanity affords him. He is for the time being a slave of the state. 1871. So, again, slavery. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you. They should all be put to death. If we were Christians, okay, and there's some question as to whether we are, because Mark Passio says that 90% of us are practicing Satanists, and I think he's right. When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. And this is Jefferson's seal. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. So if we're Christians, we can have a benevolent dictator or a dictator tyrant, or a tyrant dictator. Obama was a textbook tyrant. Pelosi gets up and tells the House, we can't read this bill until after we approve it. Lindsey Williams had a story. He was a Southern Baptist preacher that went to the Alaska oil pipeline in the 60s to preach the gospel to all those pipeliners in Alaska. And the people that were running the show liked what he did so much, they gave him a free place to stay in their camp and invited him to their corporate meetings. And he got to know some of these movers and shakers, and he's been in touch with them ever since. And every 6 months or a year, he'd come out and he'd say, the leader telling me that this is what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, that's the stuff that would happen. And so, anyways, what happened is when Trump got elected, Lindsey Williams came out and said that the elite told him that God had intervened and that their plans were on hold until Trump was out of office. And so, but now he's out of office. So we'll see. We, the people, are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who would pervert the Constitution. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. It's time to get unplugged, folks. All executive orders are regulations for property of the government and therefore a color of law. Color of law is something that looks like law but isn't. It's a felony to violate your rights under the color of law. They can violate your rights as long as they can claim good faith, tell them it's a felony, and have witnesses. Again, it's time that we started treating them like criminals because they're behaving like criminals. America needs God. Share if you agree. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. King James Version, chapter 20, verse 3. The New World Order will require that you worship government. That's going on in China right now with the Falun Gong, that they're doing their organ harvesting programs. If you're being forced to sign anything put without prejudice, either on the line or over your signature, but make sure and write the without prejudice before you sign it. I have personally done that with federal judges, and when you sign it, that's no contract. And friend of mine, Kevin Hines, okay, they call him the banker. Yeah, he even said that a federal judge told him that back, in the 90s. If they refuse to allow you to put without prejudice, make an affidavit at the earliest opportunity and attach it to a notice of void judgment. Every consent involves submission, but a mere submission does not necessarily involve consent. That's a maxim of law. When they have you in their jail and give you something to sign, they're wanting you to pay for your own imprisonment. If you refuse to sign, it's a commercial dishonor, and they write in refused. And it is effectively signed, and you paid for your own imprisonment. If you write in there without prejudice, which is exactly what I do, I have put without prejudice on plea bargains and on bonds, and it was no problem. And under Title I, Section 1, a signature is a mark. And so I had a cop, I signed a ticket without prejudice, and with a cop in New Mexico, and he said, aren't you even going to sign it? And I said, well, I said, under Title I, Section 1, a signature is a mark. It can be anything. So that's the signature. And he took it. There's no problem. and it's not signed. We need to stay out of their so-called courts. We need to be convening our own common law juries in suits of common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20. The right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall otherwise be examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So the common law courts trump everything. There's no Article 3 courts except for the Supreme Court in certain circumstances. Remember, there's the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia. So if you're going to bring up issues that are in the District of Columbia, then you're in the District of Columbia. It's all in what you say. Depends on the issue presented. All other courts are Article 1 courts under martial law. Judge wears a black robe military uniform. But a writ of error, okay? Look up this case, Brown versus Texas, 443 U.S. 47, 1979, on appeal for the County Court at Law number 2 in El Paso County, Texas. It doesn't say, but you go and look that case up and it'll say it was appealed from the County Court at Law number 2 in El Paso County, Texas. So somebody circumvented all the appeals courts, went directly to the Supreme Court, and they answered it. And I think they did a writ of error, okay? I don't know. It doesn't say what they did. It just says on appeal. And but I think it was a writ of error. And so I think that if you do any appeal from any state court, that you can do a writ of error, and you'll be Article 3 court. My upcoming videos, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 26, Challenge to Standing. Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts number 23, Legislative Courts. Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts number 24, Clean Hands. The Right to Keep and Bear Arms, the Militia. Okay, we're going to do some videos on the militia and on about IRS authority. So those are coming up, and that, I think, wraps this one up. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I hope you got something out of it. These videos, what I do is I make a PDF file out of them, out of the PowerPoint presentation. And if you send me an email, I'll be glad to send you a copy of the PDF so that you'll have the sites and everything. Some of them, a lot of them are up on my website, but this one won't be because it's done now, and the stuff on my website's been up there quite a while. So, but if you send me an email, I'll send it to you, engineerwin@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.